This video presents a reported personal near-death experience. It is told in a documentary style, based on public accounts of Howard Storm's testimony. The events beyond the hospital room cannot be independently verified in the same way as ordinary historical facts. So this story is presented as Storm reported and interpreted it. In the summer of 1985, an American art professor named Howard Storm was in Paris, surrounded by the history, beauty, and culture of one of the world's most celebrated cities. Paris is a place that often turns memory into myth. Its streets, museums, bridges, and cathedrals have shaped the imagination of travelers for centuries. But according to the story Storm would later tell, his most unforgettable encounter in France did not happen in a museum, a cathedral, or a crowded street. It happened in a hospital room at the edge of death. Storm was not, by his own later description, a deeply religious man. Public accounts describe him before the experience as a committed atheist, skeptical of faith and confident in the world he could see, measure, and explain. He was an artist and teacher, a man of intellect and ambition. He had spent years thinking about beauty, form, and human expression. Yet he later said that before his near-death experience, he had little interest in God, prayer, or spiritual surrender. Faith, to him, belonged to other people. Then, during a trip abroad, a sudden medical emergency forced him to confront something he had not expected to face so soon: his own mortality. While in Paris, Storm became seriously ill and was taken to a hospital. Public retellings identify the crisis as a severe medical emergency requiring urgent treatment. The pain, he later said, was overwhelming. In an excerpt from his book shared by Life After Life, he described wanting oblivion and escape from what he called all-consuming, unbearable pain. In the ordinary world, he was a patient in crisis, waiting for the medical help that might save him. But in his account, something changed. Storm later wrote that he suddenly found himself standing between two hospital beds. He wondered why he was standing and why he seemed alive. He described the moment not as a dream, but as something sharper and more vivid than ordinary waking life. The floor felt cool beneath his feet. The smells in the room seemed intense. The sounds of breathing and blood seemed close and real. He later wrote that he felt more alive than he had ever felt before. For many people, near-death stories begin with calm. A tunnel, a feeling of floating, a bright, welcoming light. Storm's story began differently. According to his public testimony, he tried to get the attention of people in the hospital room, but they did not respond as he expected. Then he became aware of voices calling him away. The figures, as he described them in later interviews and summaries, seemed to know him. They urged him to come with them. At first, he followed. He was confused, vulnerable, and uncertain. In his telling, that decision led him away from the hospital room and into darkness. The atmosphere changed. The voices became cruel. The darkness became terrifying. Public summaries of Storm's account say he believed he had entered a place he later understood as hell, where he was tormented by destructive beings. The Swedenborg Foundation's recap notes that Storm later recognized something disturbing in those beings. They were, in his words, people like himself, self-absorbed and convinced of their own goodness. That detail is one reason Storm's story has continued to interest listeners. The terror in his account was not simply about supernatural monsters. It was moral. It suggested a world where selfishness, cruelty, pride, and isolation become visible. In documentary terms, this is the turning point of the story. A man who had rejected religion found himself, by his own account, desperate for rescue. Then, according to the story, a memory surfaced. Storm remembered a line from childhood, a call to Jesus. At first, he resisted, but as the fear grew, he cried out. In the account he later gave, the name of Jesus became the turning point. The darkness did not have the final word. A light came toward him, and with it, a presence he would describe not as judgment first, but as overwhelming love. Storm said he encountered Jesus. In a public interview recap, he described the love he felt as beyond ordinary human comparison, like the feeling of falling deeply in love magnified beyond anything in life. He described being held, rescued, and known completely. For a documentary video, The important point is not to claim that a camera followed him beyond death. The important point is that Storm believed this encounter was real, and that belief changed everything about him. Many near-death testimonies include what is called a life review. Storm's account did as well. According to the Swedenborg Foundation recap, his review focused largely on relationships. How he had treated people, how he had loved, and how he had failed to love. In that moment, the measure of a life was not status, achievement, intelligence, or reputation. It was the human being standing nearby. A careless word mattered. A selfish choice mattered. A moment of kindness mattered. Storm's account suggests that the most ordinary moments were the ones that carried spiritual weight. The way a person speaks to a child. The way a husband or wife listens. The way a stranger is ignored or helped. The way a person uses power over someone weaker. In his retelling, heaven did not ask first whether he had been successful. It asked whether he had loved. When Storm asked what he should do, the answer attributed to Jesus was simple. Love the person that you're with. It was not a complicated theology. It was not a command to become famous or impressive. It was immediate, human, and practical. Love the person in front of you. Storm also reported visions connected with heaven. Public summaries describe his near-death experience as including not only hell and rescue, but visions of heaven and answers to questions. Later, he would speak about heaven as home, a place where separation from loved ones feels brief compared with eternity. The imagery in this video remains reverent and symbolic. Light, peace, reunion, and a sense of belonging rather than literal certainty. The contrast in his story is striking. Darkness was associated with isolation, bitterness, and self-centeredness. Light was associated with love, relationship, and truth. Whether one interprets the experience spiritually, psychologically, or symbolically, the structure of the testimony is powerful. Storm moved from fear to rescue, from pride to humility, from disbelief to faith. But Storm's story did not end in the light. According to his account, he was sent back to the hospital room, back to pain, back to the body he had briefly seemed to leave behind. The return was not portrayed as easy. In the sources recounting the event, he came back to a life that still required medical care, recovery, and the difficult work of change. A near-death experience, if it is genuine to the person who reports it, does not remove the need to live. It intensifies it. The most verifiable part of any near-death story is not the hidden realm it describes, but the life that follows. Public accounts say Storm's experience changed him from an atheist into a Christian pastor, and that he later dedicated himself to helping others find peace and purpose. Whether viewers accept every detail of the experience or approach it with skepticism, the transformation became part of the public record of his life. That transformation is what gives the story its documentary weight. A frightening event in a Paris hospital became, for Storm, the dividing line between two lives. Before it, he described himself as distant from faith. After it, he spoke publicly about prayer, forgiveness, humility, and love. The man who once dismissed religion became a man who told others that love was the central reality of existence. The message Storm says he brought back was not complicated. It centered on love, humility, and the way people treat one another. In the Swedenborg Foundation recap, he is quoted as saying that success is not about money, cars, or clothes, but kindness and love. That theme gives the story its enduring pull, a vision beyond death that returned with a command for life. Near-death experiences remain debated. Scientists, theologians, skeptics, and believers interpret them differently. Some see them as spiritual evidence. Others see them as the brain under extreme stress. Medical crisis, trauma, medication, oxygen loss, and memory can all become part of the discussion. But the debate does not erase the human force of these stories. They endure because they speak to questions that every person eventually faces. What happens when we die? Are we more than the body? Is love only a human emotion, or is it connected to something eternal? And if life is reviewed, not by wealth or recognition, but by the way we treated others, what would that review reveal? Howard Storm's story continues to be told because it carries the structure of an ancient human question. If death is not the end, what matters most before we get there? His answer, after the experience he said he had in Paris, was love. Love the person in front of you. Love when it is inconvenient. Love when pride says not to. Love when no one is filming, applauding, or keeping score. For him, the hospital room became more than a place of crisis. It became the threshold between one life and another. And whether seen as testimony, mystery, warning, or transformation, his story asks every viewer the same question. If today were the measure of your life, what would love ask you to change? Perhaps that is why the story still resonates. It does not ask only whether heaven is real. It asks whether we are living as if love is real. It asks whether the person beside us is being treated as someone sacred. And in the quiet after the story ends, that question remains.